Luke Taylor, a successful entrepreneur who secretly visits one of his own luxury stores, only to discover that a trusted manager is turning customers away with unfair assumptions and bias. Determined to fix this, Luke faces a difficult decision: how to stand up for the values he built his company on without risking everything he's worked for. As he steps in to make changes, he realizes that earning back trust and rebuilding a respectful culture is anything but easy. Tensions rise, a new leader steps up, and just when things start looking up, a familiar face returns, asking for a second chance. Will Luke hold firm, or will the past threaten his plans? Curious about what happens next? Hit like and subscribe to follow the full journey, and drop a comment. How would you handle finding hidden prejudice in your own business? Let's get into it. Luke Taylor stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, the Chicago skyline stretching out before him. The city had always been a mix of inspiration and challenge, a place where he'd scrape by with his mother in a cramped apartment, where he'd walk the long city blocks dreaming of the future. Now at 45, Luke had realized more of those dreams than he ever thought possible. He was the founder and CEO of Taylor & Company, a luxury retail chain known for its refined elegance and impeccable service. The brand had grown to symbolize more than just high-end products. It was about accessibility without sacrificing prestige, a place where luxury felt welcoming to all. That vision had been a guiding principle for Luke ever since he opened his first store in Chicago over a decade ago. But the call he'd received the previous week had stirred up doubts he couldn't ignore. Reports from his flagship store, right here in Chicago, had shown a worrying trend: low customer satisfaction, an uptick in complaints, and a significant drop in repeat business. The comments were often vague, referencing cold service or uncomfortable experiences, but a few had been more explicit. Customers felt unwelcome. Some even mentioned instances of prejudice. Luke paced across his living room, trying to shake off the frustration that had been nagging him for days. He trusted his managers to uphold the company's values, especially in Chicago, where it all began. Yet, the picture painted by those complaints suggested a different reality. If customers felt judged or ignored in his stores, it went against everything he'd built Taylor & Company to represent. He had to get to the bottom of it, and the only way to truly see what was going wrong was to observe it himself. Luke decided he would go undercover, visit the store as an ordinary customer, and see how he was treated when no one knew his name or his status. It was a risky plan, but he knew it was the only way to see the truth. The next morning, Luke dressed in a pair of worn jeans, a hoodie, and an old baseball cap. His usual polished look was nowhere to be seen, and that was exactly how he wanted it. He pulled the cap low over his eyes and glanced in the mirror, barely recognizing himself. This was a persona he hadn't worn in a long time. The man he'd been before success transformed his life. He made his way to the Taylor & Company flagship store in downtown Chicago, the same location where he'd cut the ribbon years ago. As he approached the sleek glass entrance, he hesitated for a moment, looking up at the gold-lettered sign that spelled out his own name. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, but he had to know what was really happening inside those walls. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. A soft chime announced his entry, the sound echoing through the polished marble floors and high ceilings of the store. The familiar scent of leather, cologne, and freshly brewed coffee from the complimentary cafe filled the air. It was the same luxurious atmosphere he had carefully crafted, but today it felt different, distant, unwelcoming. As he walked through the aisles, he noticed the elegantly arranged displays of watches, jewelry, and designer clothing. The space was busy with affluent customers, each browsing with the quiet confidence of those who knew they belonged. But Luke felt eyes on him, lingering, assessing. He spotted Eric Price, the store manager, standing near a display of handbags, his posture straight and his gaze sharp behind the frame of expensive glasses. Luke had known Eric for almost a decade. He'd been one of the company's earliest hires, climbing the ranks with a tenacity that Luke had admired. But now, as Luke watched him, subtly directing the attention of the sales associates, he sensed something else, a guarded, almost territorial attitude that clashed with the inclusive culture Luke had tried to cultivate. Luke picked up a sleek silver watch from one of the glass cases, letting the cool metal rest in his palm. He knew this model well, one of their best sellers priced at over $100,000. He admired the craftsmanship, remembering the Swiss factory tour he'd taken to ensure the quality of these pieces. "Excuse me," Luke said, his voice deliberately casual. He tilted the watch slightly, catching the light. "Can you tell me more about this piece?" Eric approached, his polished shoes tapping lightly on the marble floor. His smile was professional, but as he glanced over Luke's casual attire, it tightened slightly. "That's a limited edition," Eric said, his tone clipped. "Very exclusive. It's quite expensive, actually." Luke looked at him steadily, feeling the first prickle of irritation. "I like exclusive pieces," he replied with a small smile. "How much is this one?" Eric hesitated, as if debating whether to give a direct answer. "It's priced at $122,000, he said eventually, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Luke's face, looking for signs of wealth. "But we have other options that might be more in line with your expectations." Luke felt the sting of the implication, but he kept his expression neutral. He placed the watch back into the display case, his movements deliberate. "And if I wanted to buy this one?" he asked evenly, testing Eric's response. Eric's polite facade cracked slightly, revealing a hint of annoyance. "Well, I'd need to see proof of payment first," he said, his tone growing colder. "We don't just let anyone walk out with our best pieces." Luke's stomach tightened at the casual dismissal. It wasn't just about the watch or the money. It was the way Eric looked at him, the assumption that someone dressed like Luke didn't belong here. The realization struck deep, resonating with the memories of all the times he had been judged before he made his fortune. "I see," Luke said softly, fighting to keep his voice calm. He turned away from Eric, walking towards the exit without another word. As he stepped back out into the chilly morning air, he felt a storm brewing inside him. He had expected to find some issues, but he hadn't anticipated this kind of blatant prejudice, especially not from someone he had trusted. Back on the bustling streets, Luke found himself wandering without direction, replaying the encounter in his mind. The cold condescension in Eric's voice echoed through his thoughts. How many customers had been treated like that? How many people had been made to feel as if they didn't belong simply because they didn't fit some narrow image of wealth? He walked for nearly an hour, memories of his early days bubbling up in his mind. He thought of his mother's hands, worn from long shifts as a nurse's aide, and how she'd saved up for months to buy him a decent suit for his first job interview. He remembered being turned away from high-end shops when he was just starting out, dismissed because he couldn't afford the luxury they sold. By the time he reached the river, the anger in his chest had cooled, replaced by a steely resolve. He wouldn't let this go. He wouldn't let his store become just another place that judged people by their appearances. He had built Taylor & Company to be different, and he would make sure it stayed that way. He took out his phone and called Nicole, his assistant. "I need you to arrange a meeting with Eric Price tomorrow at the company headquarters," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Tell him it's about a performance review." Nicole hesitated at the other end of the line. "Is everything all right, Mr. Taylor?" Luke took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the skyline across the water. "Not yet, Nicole, but it will be." That evening, back in his penthouse, Luke sat in his study, surrounded by framed photos of the milestones in his life. A newspaper clipping from the opening of Taylor & Company store in Chicago, a candid photo of his mother on the day he bought her a new house, and a picture of the grand opening of their latest store in New York. He picked up the framed newspaper clipping, running his thumb over the edges. He could still remember the pride he'd felt that day, seeing his name in gold above the entrance. He had wanted his stores to be a place where anyone could walk in and feel respected, where they could experience luxury without being made to feel less than. But today's encounter had shattered that illusion. If Eric treated him this way, how was he treating others? Luke thought of all the young men and women from his old neighborhood, kids with big dreams who might have walked into that store only to be judged by someone like Eric. The thought made his jaw clench with anger. He stayed up late, going through reports and customer feedback from the Chicago store, searching for patterns. He found multiple complaints about rude treatment, particularly from customers who didn't fit the traditional mold of high-end shoppers. His heart sank as he realized just how deep the problem might run. But his sadness only deepened his determination. He couldn't change the past, but he could ensure a better future. Tomorrow he will face Eric, not as Luke the customer, but as Luke Taylor, the CEO. And he would make it clear that prejudice had no place in Taylor and Company. Luke Taylor arrived early at the sleek, glass-fronted office building that housed Taylor and Company's headquarters in downtown Chicago. The sun was just beginning to peek through the skyline, casting long shadows across the streets. The building reflected the city around it, a blend of tradition and modernity, much like Luke himself. He had poured his heart into building this company, and today he would fight to preserve its integrity. He took the elevator up to the 30th floor, his mind turning over the plan he'd mapped out the night before. He wanted to ensure that the store he'd built, the company he'd nurtured, would stay true to the values he believed in. He needed to hear Eric's perspective, but he also needed to make a stand. In the executive conference room, Luke sat at the head of the long table, his fingers steepled in front of him, eyes fixed on the door. He was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit in stark contrast to the casual attire he had worn the day before. Today he would confront Eric not as a customer, but as the CEO. Eric Price arrived 15 minutes later, his stride confident as always. He was dressed sharply as usual, in a dark gray suit, but Luke could see a faint nervousness in his eyes when he entered the room. Perhaps it was the unfamiliarity of being summoned to headquarters. He had expected it to be about store performance, but when he saw Luke sitting at the head of the table, a flicker of confusion crossed his face. "Mr. Taylor," Eric greeted, his voice uncertain but polite. "I wasn't expecting to see you here this morning." Luke gestured to a chair across the table. "Sit down, Eric. We have a lot to discuss." Eric took the seat, still trying to maintain his usual air of professionalism. Luke let the silence hang for a moment, watching as Eric shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. "I visited your store yesterday," Luke began, his tone calm but edged with steel. "As a customer, you didn't recognize me because I was dressed like this." He gestured at his casual outfit, the worn sneakers and hoodie he had brought with him as a reminder. "And I saw exactly how you treat people when you think no one is watching." Eric's face paled, his eyes widening. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but Luke continued before he could find his words. "You judged me based on my appearance," Luke said, his voice growing colder. "You made assumptions about who I was and what I could afford, and you refused to give me the same respect you would have given to someone who fit your idea of a wealthy customer." "Mr. Taylor, Eric stammered, struggling to regain control of the conversation. "I didn't know it was you. If I had known—" "That's exactly the problem," Luke interrupted, leaning forward. His eyes blazed with the frustration that had built up since his visit. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic decency. This company was built on the idea that everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look or what they wear. But yesterday you made it clear that those values don't mean anything to you." Eric swallowed, his hands gripping the armrests of the chair. "Mr. Taylor, I was just trying to maintain the store's reputation. You know how competitive the luxury market is. We have to be careful about who we serve. Our customers expect a certain image, a certain atmosphere." Luke shook his head, his expression unyielding. "What I saw was not about protecting the brand's image, Eric. It was about protecting your own biases, and I can't allow that to continue." Eric's composure cracked, a flicker of desperation crossing his face. "Please, Mr. Taylor, I've been with this company for a long time. I've worked hard to build that store's reputation. I didn't mean any harm. If you give me another chance, I can—" But Luke was already standing up, his decision made. "This isn't about one mistake, Eric. It's about a pattern of behavior that goes against everything this brand stands for. You're dismissed as manager of the Chicago store, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Eric stood too, his face twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're making a mistake, Taylor. You'll regret this. I know the customers. I know how to run that store better than anyone." Luke met his glare without flinching. "What you know is how to drive away the people we claim to welcome. I won't let you tarnish this brand any further. Goodbye, Eric." With that, Luke turned away, refusing to watch as Eric stormed out of the conference room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Luke took a deep breath, trying to steady his own emotions. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. He glanced back out at the cityscape through the large windows, feeling a sense of resolution settle over him. After Eric's departure, Luke wasted no time. He called in Nicole and asked her to set up a meeting with the assistant manager of the Chicago store, Emily Johnson. He had seen Emily during his visit to the store, had noticed her professionalism even when she seemed uncomfortable with Eric's actions. Luke believed she had potential, and he wanted to see if she was ready to take on more responsibility. Later that afternoon, Emily arrived at the headquarters clearly nervous. She was in her late 20s with brown hair neatly pulled back, wearing a simple blouse and blazer. Her hands fidgeted slightly as she took a seat across from Luke, but she kept her expression polite and attentive. "Thank you for coming in, Emily," Luke said, offering a reassuring smile. "I know things have been tense at the store lately, especially with Eric's departure." Emily nodded quickly, her hands clasping in her lap. "Yes, sir. I understand why he was let go, but the staff is a bit shaken up. They're worried about what's going to happen next." Luke studied her for a moment, seeing both the anxiety and the quiet determination in her eyes. "That's exactly why I wanted to speak with you. I've been reviewing the store's recent performance, and I think you have the skills and the understanding of our values to step up as interim manager. I need someone I can trust to help us realign the store with what we stand for." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Interim manager? Me?" She seemed almost overwhelmed by the offer, but there was a spark of hope in her expression as well. "Mr. Taylor, I never thought I'd have this opportunity." Luke smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "I've seen how you handle yourself, Emily. You care about the store and the customers, and I think you understand what Taylor and Company is supposed to be. This will be a big change, and I need your help to make it happen. Will you take on this responsibility?" Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Taylor, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to make the store what it should be." Luke's smile widened, and he extended a hand. "That's what I wanted to hear. We're going to focus on retraining the staff, emphasizing customer service and inclusion. I want you to feel empowered to address any issues, and I'll be working closely with you to make sure the store reflects our values." Emily shook his hand, a look of determination settling on her face. "Thank you for this chance, Mr. Taylor. I won't let you down." As she left the office, Luke felt a sense of hope take root. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but with Emily's help, they could start turning things around. He picked up the phone and made arrangements for a staff meeting, eager to set the new direction in motion. The following week, Luke held a meeting with the entire Chicago store staff. It took place in the store's break room, a spacious area overlooking the busy streets outside. The employees shuffled in, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Emily stood in front of Luke, a clipboard in her hand, looking more confident than she had the previous week. "Thank you all for coming," Luke began, addressing the room. "I know the last few days have been challenging, and there's been a big change in leadership. I want to assure you that we're not here to point fingers. We're here to make this store the best it can be, a place where every customer feels welcome, where our values of respect and integrity are not just words but actions." The staff listened closely, their expressions gradually softening. Luke could see the tension easing, but there were still traces of uncertainty in their eyes. He turned to Emily, who took a step forward, her voice clear and steady as she spoke. "As the new interim manager, I'll be leading our efforts to improve customer service and make this store a place where everyone feels valued," Emily said, meeting the eyes of her colleagues. "We'll be conducting a series of workshops on cultural awareness, conflict resolution, and how to create a welcoming environment. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about growing together and making sure we treat every customer with the respect they deserve." A young sales associate named James Porter raised his hand. "What exactly does this training involve?" he asked, a note of concern in his voice. "And how long will it last?" Emily nodded. "The training will cover how to interact with different types of customers, how to handle difficult situations professionally, and how to create a positive shopping experience for everyone. We'll start with short sessions over the next few weeks, and there will be ongoing support after that." James seemed satisfied with the answer, but another employee, Linda Harris, an older woman with years of experience, spoke up next. And what if we see something that doesn't align with these values? Do we report it directly to you? Luke interjected before Emily could respond. Yes, you can report any concerns to Emily, and you can also come directly to me. I want you all to know that my door is always open. We're building a culture where accountability matters and where everyone has a voice. The atmosphere in the room shifted again, becoming more open, more hopeful. Luke could see that the staff wanted to believe in the changes, even if they weren't sure yet how it would all play out. He felt weight lifting from his shoulders, knowing that they were taking a step in the right direction. Luke Taylor drove to the flagship store early one morning, the autumn air crisp and cool as he pulled into the parking lot. It had been 3 weeks since he'd appointed Emily as the interim manager, and he was eager to see how things were progressing. He parked in a spot away from the main entrance, wanting to observe the changes firsthand without the pressure of his presence as CEO. As he stepped through the glass doors, the familiar chime rang out, but the atmosphere inside felt different. Luke noticed how James, the young sales associate, immediately greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, welcome to Taylor & Company. Can I help you find something today?" Luke smiled back, shaking James's hand. "I'm just browsing, thank you." James nodded and returned to assisting another customer, this time an older woman looking at scarves. Luke watched as James patiently explained the different materials and styles, his tone respectful and attentive. It was a small change, but it made a big difference. Luke wandered through the store, observing how the staff interacted with customers. He noticed Linda Harris, the more skeptical sales associate, guiding a family with young children through the watch displays, her voice softening as she described the history of the brand. Despite her initial resistance, Linda seemed to be embracing the new direction. In the clothing section, Luke spotted Emily talking to a young woman who appeared uncertain about which dress to choose. Emily's tone was warm and encouraging, and she listened attentively to the customer's needs before offering suggestions. The woman left with a smile, holding a beautifully wrapped package in her arms. As the customer walked out, Emily caught sight of Luke and made her way over, her expression brightening. "Mr. Taylor, I wasn't expecting you today. Just thought I'd drop by and see how things are going," Luke replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Looks like you're doing a fantastic job." Emily's smile widened, and she glanced around at the staff, who were now working with a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. The team has really stepped up. We've had a few bumps along the way, but the training sessions have helped a lot. I think they're starting to see that this isn't just about rules. It's about making people feel like they belong." Luke nodded, his eyes scanning the store. "I can see the difference already. Keep it up, Emily. You've turned things around quickly, and I'm proud of the progress you've made." Emily's expression softened, and she glanced toward the watch counter where James was helping a customer. "James has been a huge help, too. He's really embraced the changes, and he's great at setting the tone for the rest of the team." Luke felt a sense of relief wash over him. It had been a difficult few weeks, but seeing the transformation firsthand made it all feel worth it. The store that had once felt cold and exclusive was beginning to feel like the welcoming place he had always envisioned. The following week brought new challenges for Emily and the staff. While many of the employees had embraced the new approach, some customers were slower to accept the changes. A few of the store's more affluent patrons seemed to bristle at the increased diversity among the clientele and the more casual, open atmosphere. One afternoon, as Emily reviewed inventory sheets in her office, Linda knocked on the door. She looked anxious, her usual calm demeanor replaced with a frown. "Emily, do you have a moment?" Emily put down her pen, motioning for Linda to sit. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Linda hesitated before speaking. "There's been some pushback from a few of our regular customers. They're saying that the store feels different and not in a good way. One of them even mentioned that it's becoming too open." She made air quotes with her fingers, her expression conflicted. Emily took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I know that some people resist change, Linda, but we have to remember why we're making these changes in the first place. It's about being true to the values of the brand, making sure that every customer, no matter where they come from, feels welcome. Linda looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. I get that, Emily. I do. But these customers, they've been with us for years. If they walk away, it could hurt our sales. Emily nodded, understanding the concern. She had been worried about this reaction too, but she knew that compromise wasn't an option when it came to treating people with respect. I hear you, Linda, but if we lose a few customers because they don't want to be part of a more inclusive environment, then maybe they aren't the right fit for what Taylor & Co. stands for now. Linda studied Emily's face for a moment, then let out a slow sigh, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. You know, I think I get it. It's just a lot to get used to, but I'll do my best to help the others see it too. Emily's smile softened. Thank you, Linda. That means a lot. As Linda left the office, Emily felt a sense of reassurance. Change was never easy, but seeing Linda's shift in perspective gave her hope that they could navigate this new path together. She just needed to stay strong and keep leading by example. 1 month later, Luke decided to make another unannounced visit to the store. He had stayed in close contact with Emily throughout the transition, offering support and advice, but he knew it was important to see progress himself. He was pleased with the reports of improved customer feedback, and he wanted to ensure that the changes were taking root. As he walked through the doors, he was immediately greeted by James, who offered a warm smile and a polite, "Welcome back, Mr. Taylor." The atmosphere in the store was lighter, the staff more engaged, and Luke could see that the team was working together seamlessly. He exchanged a few words with Emily, who filled him in on the latest training sessions and customer responses. But just as Luke was about to leave, the chime above the door rang again. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the familiar figure standing in the entrance. Eric. Eric looked different than he had the last time they'd met. His usual sharp suit was rumpled, and the confident swagger in his walk was replaced with uncertainty. His eyes darted around the store, landing on Luke and Emily, who stood side by side near the watch display. "Mr. Taylor," Eric said, his voice wavering slightly as he approached them. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. Please, just give me a moment." Luke exchanged a glance with Emily, who looked surprised but stayed silent, her expression cautious. He turned back to Eric, folding his arms across his chest. "All right, Eric," Luke said coolly. "You have a moment. What is it you want to say?" Eric took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. "I came to apologize," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I was wrong. I've had time to think about my behavior, and I realize now that I made a terrible mistake. I judged people unfairly. I let my prejudices get in the way of doing my job. And I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor. Truly I am." Luke listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Eric's words seemed sincere, but Luke couldn't forget how deeply his actions had affected the store's atmosphere, how many people he might have hurt with his judgment. Eric's voice grew more desperate as he continued. "I've been with this company for years. I care about the brand, about the store. Please give me another chance. Let me prove that I can change, that I can run the store the way you want it to be run. I'll do anything." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the hum of the store's background music filling the air. Luke thought about the many times Eric had likely dismissed or mistreated customers based on their appearances, the casual cruelty he had shown when he thought no one important was watching. He considered how far the store had come since then, how much Emily had worked to foster a new environment. Luke shook his head slowly, his voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your apology, Eric, but this isn't just about one mistake. It's about a mindset, a pattern of behavior that you demonstrated for years. What I saw in the store wasn't just an oversight. It was the result of a deep-seated attitude that doesn't align with our values." Eric's face fell, his eyes filling with a mix of frustration and despair. "Mr. Taylor, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I can learn. I can change. Just give me the store back, and I'll prove it to you." But Luke's expression remained resolute. "The decision has been made, Eric. The store is doing well under Emily's leadership, and the staff has responded positively to the changes. Allowing you to return would undermine everything we've worked to achieve." Eric's shoulders slumped, his last hope slipping away. He looked at Luke, desperation turning to resignation. "I understand," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I just thought, maybe—" Luke's voice softened slightly, his gaze steady. "Eric, I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect and grow. This isn't about punishment. It's about ensuring that the right people are in place to uphold the values of the brand. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, but you won't be getting this store back." Eric nodded, his eyes downcast. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Taylor," he said quietly. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the store, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. Luke watched him go, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. He hoped that Eric would find a way to change, but he knew that he couldn't risk the integrity of his brand for the sake of giving him another chance. His responsibility was to his company, his employees, and his customers. Beside him, Emily let out a breath she'd been holding. "Thank you for not letting him come back," she said softly. "I think the staff would have been worried if he did." Luke nodded, turning to face her. "I made my decision based on what's best for the store and the people who work here. You've done a great job, Emily. Keep up the good work. We're building something special, and I'm confident in your ability to lead." Emily smiled, a sense of accomplishment shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I won't let you down." As Luke left the store, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with the right leadership and a commitment to the company's values, he knew they could continue to build a brand that stood for more than just luxury. It stood for respect, integrity, and inclusion. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the flagship store was bustling with activity. Customers moved between displays inspecting the new fall collection, while the staff assisted them with the same attentiveness and warmth that Luke had witnessed on his last visit. Emily was at the front of the store, keeping an eye on things and stepping in whenever a staff member needed support. Luke Taylor arrived unannounced once again, this time blending into the crowd rather than observing from the edges. He saw James showing a young man a new line of leather wallets, his voice enthusiastic as he explained the craftsmanship. Linda, who had been skeptical at first, now engaged warmly with a couple looking for a gift for their anniversary. Luke smiled to himself. The store's transformation wasn't complete, but the atmosphere was lighter, more welcoming. He felt a sense of satisfaction watching the interactions unfold, knowing that they were moving in the right direction. But then, just as he was about to head back out, the chime over the door rang, and a new customer strode in, a tall, middle-aged man with a haughty expression in a tailored suit that screamed money. Luke recognized him as Gerald Foster, a regular who had been one of Eric's most valued clients. Gerald glanced around, his eyes narrowing as he took in the diverse clientele browsing the store. He made his way directly to Emily, his expression a mix of disdain and impatience. "You there?" he snapped, pointing at her. "Where's Eric?" "I don't recognize anyone here anymore." Emily straightened, her professional demeanor unwavering. "Good afternoon, Mr. Foster. Eric is no longer with us, but I'd be happy to assist you with anything you need." Gerald's frown deepened. "No longer with you?" he echoed, his voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "What, did you get rid of him so you could turn this place into a flea market? Just look at the people in here. This isn't the Taylor & Company I've been shopping at for years." Luke felt a surge of anger rise within him as he watched the interaction from a distance. He fought the urge to intervene, wanting to see how Emily would handle the situation. This was the kind of challenge he had hoped she could manage, confronting customers who clung to the store's old ways, refusing to see the value in the changes they were making. Emily's smile remained in place, though a shadow of discomfort passed through her eyes. "Mr. Foster, I assure you, we're committed to providing the same quality and luxury that Taylor & Company is known for. But we also believe that everyone who comes into our store deserves to feel welcome." Gerald scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Spare me the lecture, miss. I know what I like, and it's not this. I don't need to shop where just anyone can walk in off the street and pretend they belong." Several customers nearby had paused to watch the exchange, and Luke could see that Emily felt the weight of their gazes. For a moment, he saw a flicker of doubt cross her face, but she quickly steadied herself, her voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Foster," she said, her tone respectful but unyielding. "But we believe that luxury isn't about excluding people. It's about providing a great experience to everyone. If that's not what you're looking for, then perhaps another store would be a better fit." Gerald's face flushed with anger, and for a moment it looked like he might lash out further. But then he caught sight of Luke standing nearby, recognition flickering in his eyes. He faltered, his mouth closing as he tried to regain his composure. "You'll regret this, you know," he muttered, casting one last glare at Emily before turning on his heel and stalking out of the store. Emily let out a slow breath as the door swung shut behind Gerald, but she held her head high, her expression steady. She glanced at Luke, who gave her a small nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement that she had done well. The other customers slowly returned to their browsing, and the moment of tension began to dissipate. Luke stepped forward, meeting Emily's gaze. "You handled that well, Emily. Not many people would have been able to stay as composed as you did." Emily offered a small, tired smile. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. It wasn't easy, but I know that's the kind of environment we want to build. I just hope I didn't lose us a customer." Luke shook his head, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "If that's the kind of customer we lose, then it's a loss we can live with. You stood up for what this brand is supposed to be, and that's what matters most." Later that evening, after the store had closed and the staff had gone home, Luke and Emily sat in the manager's office, sharing a cup of coffee. The events of the day still lingered in the air, but the store was quiet now, the displays neatly arranged for the next day's shoppers. "You know, when I first started working here, I was so intimidated by the idea of luxury," Emily confessed, stirring her coffee slowly. "I thought it meant exclusivity, that it was all about keeping certain people out. But today I realized it doesn't have to be like that." Luke smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I felt the same way when I first got started, but I always believed that luxury is about making people feel special, no matter who they are. It's about showing them that they matter. That's what I wanted this brand to stand for." Emily met his gaze, a look of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance to see that, Mr. Taylor. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm ready to keep building something that we can all be proud of." Luke reached out and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You're doing a great job, Emily. And you're right, this is just the beginning. There's a lot more work ahead. But I believe in you, and I believe in this team. Together we'll make sure Taylor & Company stays true to its values." As they finished their coffee, Luke looked around the store, reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. He knew that not every day would be easy, and that there would always be challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of hope for the future. The next morning, Luke returned to the store for a meeting with the staff. The team gathered in the break room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Emily stood beside him, her shoulders squared, her confidence shining through. "Thank you all for being here," Luke began, his voice carrying a warmth that came from the heart. "Yesterday we faced a tough situation, but I'm proud of how we handled it. Emily showed what it means to stand up for our values, and I hope you all see what we're building here. A place where every customer feels welcome, where luxury is about respect as much as it is about quality." The staff nodded, murmurs of agreement spreading through the room. Linda raised a hand, her expression thoughtful. "I just want to say, I've been here a long time, and I didn't always understand why we needed to change. But after seeing how Emily handled that customer yesterday, I think I get it. It's not just about what we sell, it's about who we are." Emily smiled at Linda, a grateful look in her eyes. "Thank you, Linda, and thank you all for being willing to adapt and grow. We're creating something special here, and I'm proud to be a part of it." Luke glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each of his employees. He could see the hope and determination in their faces, a reflection of his own resolve. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I believe in this team. I believe in what we can achieve together. Let's keep moving forward." The meeting ended on a positive note, with the staff leaving the room feeling energized and united. Luke stayed behind for a moment, watching as Emily and the others returned to their duties, knowing that he had made the right choice in giving her the opportunity to lead. As he left the store, Luke couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. It had been a long road, full of difficult decisions and uncomfortable truths, but in the end, it was worth it. He had built this company to be a place where people felt valued, and now, with the right leadership and a renewed commitment to their values, he knew that vision was finally coming to life. The weeks that followed were filled with steady progress. The new training sessions that Emily had implemented continued, covering topics from customer service etiquette to cultural awareness. Luke Taylor stayed involved, attending occasional sessions and offering guidance, but he allowed Emily the space to lead. Each day, the store felt a little more like the place he had always imagined it could be, a luxury store where anyone who walked through the doors could feel at home. As the holiday season approached, Luke and Emily decided to host a relaunch event for the flagship store, a chance to celebrate the changes and formally introduce the new direction to customers, both old and new. They sent out invitations to local community leaders, loyal customers, and new clients alike, promising an evening of champagne, hors d'oeuvres, and live jazz. On the night of the event, the store was transformed into an elegant celebration space. Displays of the new winter collection gleamed under the soft lighting, and tables draped in velvet held trays of glittering jewelry and timepieces. The staff bustled around, dressed in stylish black, setting up the final touches. Luke arrived early to review the preparations, dressed in a sleek tuxedo that hinted at both his refined taste and the pride he took in the evening's significance. He walked through the store, feeling the atmosphere of anticipation, and found Emily in the back giving last-minute instructions to the team. "Everything looks perfect, Emily," Luke said, smiling as he approached. "You've done an incredible job pulling this together." Emily turned to face him, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'm just glad to see everyone so excited about the event. It feels like a fresh start for all of us." Luke nodded, looking around at the staff, who were now laughing and working together as they prepared to welcome the guests. It was a far cry from the tense, divided environment he'd witnessed during his first undercover visit. It is a fresh start, and tonight we're going to show people what Taylor and Company is really about. As the clock struck 7, guests began to arrive, greeted warmly by James and Linda at the entrance. Luke mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with familiar faces, while keeping an eye on how the staff interacted with newcomers. He watched as Emily moved gracefully from group to group, sharing the story of the store's new mission and the importance of creating an inclusive luxury experience. But it wasn't just words. The changes were evident in the way the staff treated every guest, whether they were longtime customers or first-time visitors, whether they came dressed in designer suits or simple jeans and a sweater. Each person was greeted with the same respect, the same genuine interest in helping them find what they needed. Luke saw how the guests responded, how their smiles widened as they realized they were welcome. Near the end of the evening, Emily took the microphone, standing beneath a large banner that read, "Welcome to the new Taylor and Company." The room fell silent as she addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We've been through some changes over the past few months, and we're so excited to share our new vision with you. At Taylor and Company, we believe that luxury is about more than just beautiful products. It's about creating a space where every person feels valued, where everyone can find something special that speaks to them. That's what tonight is about, and that's what every day will be about from here on out." A warm round of applause filled the store, and Luke felt a lump form in his throat as he watched Emily speak. She had taken the opportunity he'd given her and turned it into something more. A genuine transformation, one that had brought new life to the store and to the team. As the event wound down and the last of the guests trickled out into the chilly night, Luke and Emily lingered by the entrance, watching as the lights of downtown Chicago sparkled around them. The evening had been a success, and they both felt a sense of quiet triumph. "Tonight was perfect," Emily said, turning to Luke with a smile. "I think people really got to see what we've been working so hard for." Luke nodded, slipping his hands into the pockets of his coat. They did. But more importantly, the people who needed to see it the most were right here in the store. Our staff, our team. They see that it's possible to change, That the values we've been talking about aren't just talk. Emily's expression softened, and she looked down at the sidewalk for a moment before meeting Luke's gaze. I never thought I'd be here, leading this team, making a real difference. I owe you so much, Mr. Taylor. Thank you for believing in me. Luke reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. You earned this, Emily. You're the one who turned things around, who brought the team together. I just gave you the chance. You did the rest, and I couldn't be more proud of what you've accomplished. Emily's eyes shimmered with gratitude, and for a moment she seemed to struggle to find the right words. But then she simply smiled, the kind of smile that spoke of hard-won confidence and hope for the future. Here's to a new beginning, she said softly, raising an imaginary glass. Luke nodded, raising his hand in response. To a new beginning. They stood in silence for a moment longer, looking out at the city that had given both of them so much and taken just as much in return. For Luke, this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the start of a new one, a chance to build something that would last, something that would make a difference. As he watched Emily walk back inside, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, other stores to visit, other managers to meet, other minds to change. But with Emily and the rest of his team by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Luke Taylor woke early the morning after the relaunch event, a soft glow from the sunrise filling his penthouse. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, looking out over the city that had shaped so much of his life. The streets below were already bustling, people moving with purpose, their stories intertwining with the pulse of Chicago. He couldn't help but think back to how far he had come, from the boy who had to scrape together change for bus fare, to the man standing here, watching the sunrise over a city that now respected him as a leader. Yet despite all the success, it was the transformation of Taylor and Company over the past few months that filled him with the deepest sense of pride. The relaunch event had been a turning point, but Luke knew that the journey was far from over. He thought of the other stores across the country, each with its own unique challenges, each with managers who would need to understand the new direction he had set for the brand. He had already scheduled visits to some of the key locations, starting with their largest store in Los Angeles, where he had heard whispers of similar issues to those he'd faced in Chicago. But this time, he wouldn't be going in blind. He had learned from his experience with Eric and had seen firsthand the importance of listening not just to numbers in sales reports, but to the way people felt when they walked through his doors. He would carry that lesson with him to every store he visited, working to ensure that the culture he envisioned was alive and thriving in every location. As he sipped his coffee, Luke's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Emily. Emily. Morning, Mr. Taylor. Just wanted to thank you again for last night. The team is still buzzing with excitement, and I think it's really sunk in for everyone. Looking forward to the next chapter. Luke smiled and quickly typed out a reply. Luke. Morning, Emily. You did an amazing job last night. Couldn't have done it without you. Keep up the great work. I'm counting on you. He put down his phone, a sense of optimism settling in his chest. He thought of Emily's journey from a quiet assistant manager unsure of her own voice to a leader who could stand up for the values of the brand. It was a testament to what could happen when you believed in people, when you gave them the tools to succeed. He hoped that he could find more Emilys in the other stores, people ready to step up, ready to make a difference. Luke looked out over the city one more time before turning away from the window, a new determination in his step. Today would be the start of his next project, a comprehensive training program for all Taylor and Company managers, aimed at embedding the values of inclusivity and respect into the heart of their operations. He was already working with his team on developing the modules, and he had a call scheduled with a cultural awareness expert later that afternoon. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be resistance in some places, but that didn't deter him. Change rarely came without struggle, but as he had seen in Chicago, it was worth it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt certain that he was building something that would last. A few days later, Luke sat in his office at the headquarters, reviewing the draft of the new training manual when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was Sarah Jacobs, the manager of the Los Angeles store. Luke had been keeping an eye on Sarah's progress. She was known for her sharp business acumen, but he had heard that her leadership style could sometimes be rigid. He picked up the call, leaning back in his chair. "Good morning, Sarah. How are things in LA?" There was a pause on the other end, and when Sarah finally spoke, her voice sounded hesitant. "Good morning, Mr. Taylor. I'm doing well. I actually wanted to talk to you about the changes you've been implementing." Luke's interest piqued. "I'm listening. What's on your mind?" "Well, I've been reading through the new training materials you sent over," Sarah began. "And to be honest, I wasn't sure about it at first. It's a different approach than what I'm used to, focusing so much on the customer experience, on making sure everyone feels welcome, even if they don't look like our typical clientele." Luke remained silent, letting Sarah work through her thoughts. He could hear the uncertainty in her voice, but there was something else too, something that sounded like genuine curiosity. "I wasn't sure if it would work here," Sarah continued, "but I've been trying some of the methods you suggested, and I have to admit, I'm seeing a difference. The staff seems more engaged, and I've even had a few customers mention that they feel more comfortable shopping here. It's not perfect yet, but I think it might be worth exploring more." A smile tugged at the corners of Luke's mouth. "I'm glad to hear that, Sarah. It's not about changing everything overnight. It's about taking those first steps and seeing where they lead. If you need any support, you know you can reach out to me anytime." Sarah let out a small, relieved laugh. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I think I might just take you up on that. And, well, I'd like to know more about what you did in Chicago. It sounds like you had quite the journey there." Luke nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'd be happy to share everything I've learned. Why don't we set up a call next week, and I'll walk you through it." "That sounds great," Sarah replied, her voice brighter than before. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'll talk to you then." As the call ended, Luke felt a surge of hope. If Sarah, with all her reservations, could start to see the value in what they were doing, then maybe the rest of the stores would follow. He knew that there would still be challenges, but he also knew that he wasn't alone in facing them. He turned back to his desk, pulling up the draft of the training program. There was still so much to do, but he felt ready for it. Ready to build a company that stood for more than just luxury, one that stood for the dignity and respect of every person who walked through its doors. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this story of transformation, leadership, and staying true to your values. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more stories that inspire, challenge, and entertain, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, and leave a comment below about what part of the story resonated with you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, your support helps me bring more stories to life. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.